Whenever you're ready.
Oh, how's great. All right. Do we have any public comment?
Yes, we do.
Yes, allowed to talk. Welcome, Mr. Pat.
Thank you. You can see me and hear me?
I can hear you.
Let's see here if I can. My video is on my side, but you're just missing out on another handsome guy.
Great. We'll be giving you about 3 minutes.
Okay, guys, more time than I need. Hi to Ian. I haven't seen him in a long time, but anyways, yeah, I am here to speak about Measure 114.
Hurry up.
Hang on. Just, my interest in 114 is I had a stepson who was shot and killed at 17, and I know what tragedy follows after something like that. It really rocks the family and the neighborhood. I am talking to you folks, and I am concerned about Chief Skinner has been on the media talking about 114 and all of the concerns about Measure 114. It was just passed. The parts of the measure have been put on hold, especially the permit to purchase process has been put on hold. But he should know that the Oregon State Police Association has a website up. It has the permit to purchase applications and all the procedures there. So there's really not that many questions. It's pretty standard for a measure to go through an implementation process. And that's what's happening now. And I would hope that he would be a little more patient and open to the normal process. In Oregon, we've had 185 homicides due to gun violence, 6 mass shootings in Oregon, 264 people have been injured from gunfire, and 600 people on average commit suicide by gun. And there is a concern about the cost of implementation. The cost will be a small fraction of what it costs our taxpayers in all of the emergency room, the police, all of the things that it takes to resolve someone's been shot and or killed. And it's estimated about $163 million we've spent on our tax dollars dealing with gun violence in Oregon. So the implementation costs will be very little. So I'm just here to hope that the Police Commission and Chief Skinner take a closer look at Measure 114 and help the process go forward. We know that it will save lives in Oregon. It's many other states have implemented this exact legislation, and it has proven to save lives and reduce gun violence. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Yes, thank you so much. Really appreciate your involvement. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Is there any more public comment?
No.
No.
I just wanted to know something. Can I ask him a question? Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead and ask him a question.
I was just wondering how many of those guns are actually like illegally owned guns, just out of curiosity. Like you mentioned a lot of killings, and I was just wondering how many of those guns are actually not registered or whatever.
I don't know that, and I don't know, maybe Chief Skinner knows that, but I think it's a pretty small percentage of guns. It's so easy to purchase a gun now. There is a background check, but there's also a loophole that you can, within 3 days, demand your gun, and many gun shops will give you a gun even before your background check is completed. So it's really We're not at all for taking guns away. We just want to have common sense regulations, so the right people will own the guns, and it'll diminish it getting in the hands of people who are inappropriate. So that's the point, that the background check is a full background check, complete background check, and not just a partial one with what's called the Charleston loophole. I'm sure Chief Skinner is familiar with that. So.
All right, thank you.
Welcome.
All right, so I'm gonna begin our meeting by welcoming our two newest commissioners. One, our first is Dr. Silky Booker, and what I'm gonna be doing in this meeting, as I have done, and because we have two new commissioners, when we get into our liaison reports and commissioner comments, I'm going to be asking each person on the meeting to do the same thing. So if you want to write something down that you're going to be asked today, is where are you from? And tell us a little bit about yourself. So that's going to be happening today. We don't have a speaker today, so we have enough time to get to know the fellow commissioners, and we're welcoming the new. So Dr. Silky Booker, I will begin with you. Welcome. Tell us where you're from, and tell us about yourself.
Thank you. Welcome everybody here today and the attendees. Thank you to the police chief, the commission, city council for selecting me to be the new one of the new police commissioners. It's a little bit about me. I moved to Eugene by way of, or Oregon, I should say, by way of England. Originally, I'm born and raised in Arkansas. I'm retired U.S. military disabled combat veteran. I'm a consultant, life coach, visionary. I'm the founder and chairman of the Oregon Black Chamber of Commerce. I'm on the board of directors for the 6th Region Global Chamber of Commerce. I'm a board member of the Eugene Economic Committee. We work with the Human Rights Commission. I'm also a state commissioner. I'm the vice chair of the Oregon Commission on Black Affairs. And I'm the founder and president of a official 501c3 nonprofit called King Silky's Blessing Boxes, to where I deliver food boxes and also focus on the mental health of families in need. And then I'm in my free time, I'm a radio show host in England. And I also do marketing in England as well. So thank you for having me here. Pleasure. And I look forward to working with you all and focusing on policy.
Thank you. Thank you. Jacina.
Yes, thank you very much for the warm welcome. It's a privilege to be here. I was actually adopted from South Korea, but I grew up in Reedsport on the Oregon coast, tiny little town, not a very diverse little town. I think I provided most of the diversity we have there. But I've lived in Eugene and in the Willamette Valley on and off for about the last 20 years. And I am married. We have 4 kids that we're raising here in the 4J school district. I am also a board member of the Lane County Diaper Bank. And I am a business owner. I am a consultant for healthcare software. And so I work with medical practices and federally qualified health centers and public health departments all over the country.
Great. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. As far as the agenda, review the agenda from last meeting. We had Dre Charles do the 2021 hate and bias report. And we also reviewed 2 policies, 805 dealing with chemical weapons and 807 dealing with impact weapons. And we have Sergeant Smith and Sergeant Soulsby. We're going to be going back to those 2 policies to complete. Next, we have our liaison reports. And we'll start with Scott Lemon. Before your report, I'd like to know where you are from and tell us a little bit about yourself, especially for Dr. Booker and Jensina.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Chair. So my name's Scott Lemons, and I am originally from Southern Arizona, a military base down there. I've moved to Eugene about 15 years ago and quickly hopped into the University of Oregon, I'd say within a couple years. graduated with a degree in psychology and a minor in public policy administration in 2019. I've been the co-founder of Sunrise Eugene and currently am working at Lane Independent Living Alliance, helping people with disabilities maneuver the many systems that we have to. And also representing the Human Rights Commission as the liaison between those two boards here. And I also serve on Cahoots and Peace Health boards. And personally, it's very nice to meet you all. And for my report, sadly, the Human Rights Commission had technical difficulties and we were not able to make a full quorum, nor we were able to get the reports from the police department. So I don't have anything to report tonight, and I'll give you a double report next month.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lehman, Adam Lehman, tell us where you're from and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Chair. My name's Alan Lyman. I'm speaking to you from the apartment that I grew up in Manhattan on the Upper East Side of New York City, where no matter how old you get, you feel like a kid when you're sitting in the apartment. I moved to Eugene about 24 years ago or something like that. At one point, I was the Eugene City Prosecutor. I was a Eugene Municipal Judge for a while. I currently am the municipal judge in the community of Veneta, Oregon, and I have a private practice where I represent employees against employers, primarily for wage and discrimination issues. And I am the liaison to the Civilian Review Board for this body. And first, I would also like to welcome the two new commissioners, and both have really exciting backgrounds, and so welcome and thank you for your participation. And the CRB did not meet since the last time we all got together, so next time you'll get a report. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilor Ye.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm Jennifer Ye. Welcome to Justina and Silky. It's nice to have you here. I have been in Eugene combined 3 times, a little over 20 years, and I'm the co-director of the Lane County History Museum on top of being a city councilor. That's me. I think the biggest thing at council has been that the commission gave its annual report, which went really well. I think was really well received. There was a lot of positive comments. I'm sure you're probably gonna maybe talk about it a little bit, but I think our team did a really good job and got asked some hard questions. Yep. and navigated it very well, I felt. So Alan, anything to add?
Yes, well, you're next on deck. So let us get to know where you're from and tell us a little bit about yourself, Councilor.
Thanks. No, I don't have anything to add on the police commission work plan. I think you guys did a great job and just ditto what Jennifer said. I'm Alan Zelenka. I'm a city councilor for Ward 3. That's the area surrounding the University of Oregon. I've been a councilor for 16 years and just reelected to my 5th term. I have been here since 1984, came here for grad school and stayed with my wife, and grew up in the Bay Area in Sunnyvale, which is in the Silicon Valley. Of course, when I was growing up, it was apples. It was cherry trees and apricots, not apples. And I'm welcome to the two new police commissioners. Thank you for your volunteer time and being on the commission.
Thank you. Vice Chair Dominguez. Bonnie? She's on. Well, I'm going to jump to Commissioner Ye.
No, you didn't.
Excuse me. Commissioner Nguyen V. I'm going to have you take until Bonnie's right back.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Um, Well, Mrs. Hawkins and Dr. Booker, I want to extend a warm welcome to you both. I look forward to working with you. So a little bit about me, I moved to Eugene in 2017 from San Francisco, where I've lived for maybe like 3 decades about. And I also went to school there. I went to San Francisco State University, where I received my secondary education credential as well as my liberal studies degree. I have over 21 years of service as a teacher, nonprofit coordinator, gang prevention specialist, mainly in working with the community. I have 2 dogs, 3 counting the one that passed away a few years ago. You know, one of the things that you might see me doing is walking my dogs if you go to dog parks yourself. Let me see what else I can tell you. Do you have any questions that you want to ask me instead of me going on and on?
No questions. Just let us know. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you feel good about.
Okay. Yeah. So in my free time, I enjoy playing volleyball. I also like to cook. What else? I'm passionate about, you know, just making sure that at the table we have a good representation for the community. I know that when I first moved to Eugene, the commission didn't have any Asian Americans representing the community. So that's why I applied. And like you, I joined with a purpose, you know, so I'm really looking forward to working with you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, Vice Chair Dominguez, tell us about where you're from and tell us about yourself.
I grew up here and I went to college here, bachelor's through my master's in architecture. I currently work as an architectural designer and I don't know, I really care about the environment and I don't know. I guess I have a bearded dragon since we're talking about pets too. So
Well, thank you.
Mhm.
Commissioner Mogart, can you tell us a little bit where you're from and tell us a little bit about yourself, the things you do?
Welcome, Dr. Booker and Hawkins. I work with Demond on the Community Advisory Committee. So looking forward to working with you too on this side. And Dr. Booker, I got to say, I'm really, really excited to be working with you. I know that you do the blessing boxes, and food insecurity is a huge thing for me. And I like to work with people who are making sure that people are getting healthy options, food options. So thank you for doing that.
Yes, sir.
I go by he, him, and I identify as a Chicano and Native American, and that's it. I've been here for about 20 years. So good to meet you all.
Thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Shivers.
Yeah, my name is Sean Shivers. I've been in Eugene almost 8 years now. Moved out relatively recently, it sounds like, compared to most folks. And my current job is I work at Emergence Drug Treatment, and I do some political work on the side as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Winbrock.
Howdy, everyone. My name is Ian Winbrock. This is my 4th year of being in Eugene. Came here for grad school. I'm an MBA student at the University of Oregon, where I'm also launching Change Finder, which is Grammarly for grants. We improve grant application success rates for nonprofits and the foundations that fund that. I also work at the University of Oregon in a social science research center called the Center for Science Communication Research. Super passionate about asking really dumb questions and about listening super critically to my fellow commissioners, because I feel like I learn the most from y'all. I also serve on the University of Oregon's Complaint Review Committee and the University of Oregon's Policy Review Committee, for their police department. And I wanted to share with you all during commissioner comments that the University of Oregon is currently reviewing both its capacity and charge for its complaint review committee and considering whether it should expand that scope. So I'm going to be working on that through June of next year. And I think the work that we do here in this commission provides a lot of context that can inform that group and their body of work. And so I'll be reaching out to Chair Boggs and talking a little bit more to the rest of the commission as that work progresses and potential opportunities both for overlap, but how that body could potentially add value for our work and how our work could potentially add value for theirs.
Great. Okay, we also have on the commission, Navasha, please tell us about yourself and where you're from.
Yeah, so first off, welcome to the new members. I've worked a little bit with Dr. Booker, so I can attest that he's freaking awesome and I'm excited to work with him some more. A little bit about myself is I am homegrown from Eugene. I'm Churchill High School alum. I went to the University of Oregon. I have my degree in psychology. I've been with the police department for almost 7 years now. I'm a background investigator, crisis negotiator. I work on the union board. I'm on our charity fund board. And my favorite position, I'm a youth services officer for Willamette High School in the Bethel School District. So I have 11 schools that I look after, and that's my pride and joy. So I also have a 1-year-old and a husband at home. And my 1-year-old is already walking, talking, and just as sassy as me. So
That's great. Also, it's supporting us is Sergeant Julie Smith. Tell us about yourself and where you're from.
Well, I grew up here in Oregon. I moved to Eugene and became a police officer in 1996. I retired in 2021, but I contract back to work with all of you and to update policy with the police department. And I have a dog named Zeus at home who's patiently waiting for me to come home.
Great. And also, I would say the backbone of the police commission is Holly Matthews. And Holly, if you can tell us a little about your position and what you do.
Sure. Well,
And where you're from.
Yeah, so I'm from Eugene, but I also lived in the Midwest in Missouri, Springfield, Missouri for most of my teenage years, and then moved back out here when I graduated high school. And I've been with the department since 2003. And I am currently the AIC Police Commission Analyst, but my real job is supporting the Chief of Police. And so I'm grateful to be here in this opportunity. And I'm always, available if you have any questions at all. Just feel free to reach out to me. I'm your liaison, so use me as a resource. So welcome aboard.
Thank you. So that leads to our last, the Chief of Police. So if you could kind of tell us where you're from and a little bit about yourself, and then you can lead into your chief's report.
Well, that works out really well, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Well, if I had my choice, I'd spend all my time and talk about how wonderful Holly, Julia, and Navasha are in the work that they do in the various areas of the police department. There's no question that we're a better organization when they're with them here and part of the EPD family. So anytime I get a chance to publicly just say how amazing those 3 women are, that's just the work they do always just is so impressive. So thank you 3 for everything that you do to support us. Welcome to the 2 new members. Looking forward to getting you up to your eyeballs in police policy and what that means. I think part of what makes it so exciting, and I think some of the existing commissioners would attest to this, is when you start really digging into the details of policy, you really figure out how complex it is to run a police department in a city that serves 180,000 people and tries to manage a $62 million general fund budget each and every year with close to 350 employees. There's a lot of moving parts. And so I appreciate the work that this commission does to help me kind of lead through a lot of change that we've seen over the last 2 years and change into the future. I'm finishing my 32nd year in law enforcement. I've worked for 4 different agencies in the state of Oregon and a different agency in Washington. So I've been all over the Northwest. I've had the benefit of being able to see good policing, bad policing, indifferent policing, and have a level of objectivity to how we do things here. I was not raised in the Eugene Police Department, and so I still feel like I have the ability to see things through a different lens. Something personal about me, my wife Carrie works for the 4J school district and does some amazing work around safety and wellness for students, suicide prevention, threat assessment, vulnerability assessments for the school, keeping north of 17,000 kids safe, and staff, and 90 different buildings. And then Jackson 15 and Kendall 13, who Kendall is playing basketball tonight, so I'm missing her basketball game, but she understands, and so we spend a lot of our time, if you remember that, for those of you that had kids that age, spend a lot of our time chasing kids around right now, going from different events. But it is the highlight of being an older dad, of having the luxury to be able to do that most of the time, and so that's a big joy that is in my life. So I'll go ahead and just launch into my chief's report unless somebody has a specific question about that. And generally speaking, what I do with my chief's report, yeah, go ahead.
You have a question, Commissioner Shivers?
Yeah, I was just wondering, I know the implementation of the recent gun reform law is pretty complicated. I know it's tied up in some of the courts right now, but I saw you had spoken to, I think, KEZI about it, so I was hoping to just hear some elaboration on that sometimes. Maybe.
Yeah, I was going to build that in my chief's report. What I was going to say is the benefit of having citizen comment and go first is it gives me a chance to talk a little bit about what's on people's minds. I can't count the number of people I've talked to about this, quite honestly, Sean. I mean, it's been all over the Oregon and all over the nation, quite frankly. And one of the things that I would say is, and I wish Tom was still on to hear me talk, because I get I think it's unfair to categorize this as a slowdown in implementation unless you fully understand what Measure 114 has asked Oregon law enforcement to do in a short period of time. And I know more about this ballot measure than I ever thought I would, based on my position as the chief, or as the president of the Oregon Association of Chiefs of Police. The first of all, let me say is that none of us as chiefs have talking or are talking or have any opinions about the constitutionality of this measure. The bottom line is our Oregon legislature and Senate bills or House bills, or a ballot measure that's voted on by the public, once that's passed, it's our responsibility to build the system and build the mechanism by which we can put it into place. And so we're working on that now. And we are, as a group.
Gloria's overly buff stomach is too full.
Hey, Silver, would you, thank you.
Sorry, Chief, go ahead. We had an interruption there.
Yeah. So we're working hard. If you read the ballot measure, there's really two definitions that are key for us. Number one is when they identify the department in the ballot measure and what the department has to do. And the department in that ballot measure is defined as the Oregon State Police. They are the department in that ballot measure. The permit agent is the local police chiefs or sheriffs, and we have our own things that we have to do. And so when Tom talks about the permit process being either unjustly delayed or that we haven't pulled this together, just this morning OSP launched a website with the first look at a draft application for permit to purchase. This is a draft application that we've worked on with OSP as we start marching down the path. So from a high level, this is what it's going to look like. If you want to purchase a firearm, you have to come into the police department or the sheriff's office and fill out this application that is supposed to be filled out in quadruplicate. Number one. Number two, then you would do fingerprints. And right now it looks as if the live scan technology, which is electronic fingerprints, is not going to be useful. So we're back to hand rolling and inking and hand rolling fingerprints and sending that packet along with fingerprints and a preliminary background investigation to, and when I say background investigation, I mean a records check to see if there's any immediate disqualifiers. That gets put together and sent off to OSP for them to do fingerprint analysis, send the fingerprints off to the FBI, get identification confirmed, another background check to make sure that we didn't miss anything. And then when that all checks out, unless it's rejected at OSP, they send it back to us, by which time an individual, whether at the time of the permit application or when they want to receive their permit, have to demonstrate that they've been through firearms training and a proficiency test that they have to do either in front of us or in front of a qualified firearms instructor that is quote unquote certified by law enforcement, which by the way, doesn't exist in the state of Oregon. So you can think about all of the different processes that we're trying to work through to be able to do this. The challenges we have is until this morning, we never saw didn't have a permit. Number two, it's a paper process by which through the mail, we have to send these things. The FBI has not agreed to take fingerprints right now for identification. OSP does not have the staff to take the same set of fingerprints and background and run the background check. We don't have the online training for education set up for these law enforcement certified instructors, whatever that means. And we're still trying to figure out what proficiency means with respect to how you're supposed to demonstrate that you can safely handle a firearm and where this should happen and under what circumstances. So when you think about all of those moving parts and all of the things that go into that, you can understand why the December 8th deadline came very, very quickly with no clarity or very little clarity on how we're going to approach some of those things. So our position and my position as a chief is not that I don't think this is a good idea. That has nothing to do with it. Any value statement is separate from just putting my department in a position that I can best meet the needs of this community when they walk through the front door and want to go through an application for a permit to purchase. So we're working on those details. We're working on the processes. I have no idea how much staff it's going to take to be able to process the numbers. We don't know. We're predicting upwards of 300,000 people in the state are going to ask for a permit. And the permits are good for 5 years. Many of those maybe don't want to buy a weapon right off the bat or a gun right off the bat, but they would like to have their permit in the event that they want to. Of those 300,000, who knows how many come to Eugene Police Department to do that. We can only charge $65 for the permit fee, but sending the fingerprints to OSP to be evaluated costs people $45 to do that. So the question becomes, of the 65 that I collect from an individual, are we paying 45 of the 65 to OSP to do their work? And now we're a net gain of $20 per permit with all of the work that we're going to need to do, mostly in our downtown records or in downstairs in the records department. Usually I'm with you guys in person and would love to be, but I've been a little under the weather, so I'm sparing you the contamination. So when you think about just seeing a ballot measure that goes on the ballot and people say yes to it and an implementation date that's a month later, what people don't understand if they don't live in the system, in the industry like I do, they don't understand the nuances of how difficult it is to just quickly stand something up. The other thing I would say, and I see you, Sean, and I'll stop after I'm done. The other thing I would say is if we're going to do anything, we better make sure we're doing it consistently and equitably across the state. So it's not a different process depending on where you go or a different evaluation depending on where you go. And so the way we're doing that is making sure we're doing this in conjunction with the chiefs across the state, our sheriff's associations, and OSP. And so the moral of the story is I'm working my butt off to get us there. And we would never do anything to delay this because I don't see any value in doing that, but I certainly am not going to accelerate something, just me guessing on how this is going to shake out. So I'll stop there for any questions that you may have specifically on that.
I have two questions specifically on that.
Commissioner Shivers has two.
Thank you. So the first one was that it sounds like this body does not have a large role in any of these processes other than, the fact that our chief is involved, and sometimes we might get comments about that. Is that impression correct?
That essentially this is all codified in law, and so there's very little wiggle room. Yes.
The second question is, what is the mandated timeline once they submit an application, pay that $65?
Yeah, it's really interesting. In the ballot measure, it talks about a 30-day turnaround. which right now there's no way we can meet 30-day turnaround when we're sending mail to OSP. They're backlogged about 30,000 backgrounds right now under the existing law for backgrounds for purchase of firearms. And then the other piece of this, Sean, that's really interesting is there's an appeals process. And the appeals process specifically articulates that our circuit court will hear these appeals and these judges will make these decisions. And the judges have no idea what that appeals process looks like, nor will they be prepared to be hearing appeals on something like this. So again, we're working through the issues, but there's probably more things we don't know than we know right now about ballot measure 114.
Thank you.
Commissioner Winbrock,
You can go to
Commissioner Lemons.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chief. More of a comment than a question, but basically, if Oregon State Police and other police chiefs across the state are slow walking this, or I can see the barriers that exist, but Eugene has always been a leader when it comes to this. And I would really hope that even if the rest of the chiefs are slow rolling across the state, that we can implement this as soon as possible. And that might give us some area to actually show how it can be done and how it can be done better. So I would just like to keep that in mind. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that comment, but I would point you back to the ballot measure. If you haven't read it, it is predicated on OSP being ready to receive these. So it does me no good to do anything until OSP is ready to receive it. They're the ones that actually have to be the authors of the application. So once we have an application in place, and once we identify that they're at least ready to receive these, then I can start welcoming people in. The piece that still has yet to be clarified by the Department of Justice is how exactly are we getting people the training and the proficiency test. I would say to you that I'm not about ready to have somebody walk into the lobby of the police department with a handgun and show me that they can safely load it, unload it, and pull the trigger. So where is that supposed to happen? That's one of the challenges that we have is a permit cannot be issued unless you demonstrate that you've passed a knowledge test and a proficiency test. And there's no mechanism right now to be able to do either one of those. So we're working on what that looks like as well. So we're going to be ready to go just as soon as we can be ready to go, Scott. I promise you.
Oh no, and thank you for that. I agree that everyone should be trained as much as possible. So please take OSP out of that statement. I just don't want Eugene Police Department to be following other police departments. I think we're a leader in this state. So thank you, Chief.
Yeah, I have one question regarding the ballot measure, but I'll start with what's been happening out of San Francisco. Although I haven't been on the police commission the longest, I do look at other bodies. And so the San Francisco County Board of Supervisors, and they function as both a county and a city. So they have a blended role. So they're a little bit different from the city of Eugene, whereas Lane County Board of Commissioners has a different set of jurisdictions and policy questions than the city of Eugene. But I'm all bringing this up because the San Francisco supervisors voted Tuesday to put the brakes on a policy that would have allowed the police department to use robots for deadly force. And the reason that I bring it up is not because I feel like we should consider whether or not we're using robots for deadly force, but just as an illustration of kind of how bodies have to respond when the public is weighing in on an issue. So there was ledge in the state of California that made it so that police departments had to inventory military grade equipment and seek approval for its use. And so they were updating the policy, and in updating the policy, they wanted to be able to use robots for situational awareness and going into dangerous situations. And there was, I think, might have been one sentence that said, and these military grade hardware could be used in a deadly force situation. So the public responded. And again, I just think that it's an illustration of how our body can proactively solicit input on policy. And again, if you haven't set a Google alert for police policy, wow, there's just so many bodies all across the country weighing in on some really important issues. And I think there is a lot to learn from different bodies, even though their jurisdictions vary differently from ours. And we're really lucky to have the chief in his position in the state, which brings me to my next question, Chief. And I'm curious if you feel or any of your colleagues feel around the state, if there's a role for the private sector in this. Because it feels to me like this is an unfunded mandate, and unless there's some sort of federal legislation that the Inflation Reduction Act, right? Y'all have a funding stream that doesn't seem like it's sustainable, and perhaps this is an opportunity for a statewide partner to be able to stand up some training that could be sustainable.
Yeah, thanks, Ian, for that comment. I think there's an opportunity here for parts of this ballot measure to be achieved by the private sector, specifically around the educational training piece. And if you've looked at the ballot measure, it's educational training and proficiency shown around gun laws, federal gun laws, safe storage, Abuse Prevention Act, some of those things around possession and ownership of gun, and then the actual demonstration of the proficiency. We're looking at whether we can outsource that to somebody that we would, there's no such thing as a law enforcement certified third party, but maybe there is a third party that we could partner with, that we are confident in their abilities to be able to, if they come with their certificate from that training course, that they're able to use that as their proficiencies, that we're not doing it on site with individuals. The other pieces can only happen by law enforcement. The taking of fingerprints, and the access of the CJIS data, which is Criminal Justice Information System, that the FBI oversees, can only be accessed by CJIS compliant agencies, and that's only agencies that have certain credentials like law enforcement agencies. So I think we can kind of split the baby on this and do some of it through third party, but most of this is going to be done by the law enforcement agencies around the state.
Thank you, Chief.
Dr. Booker?
Just a question. Chief, did you hear anything about an injunction delayed the implementation of ballot measure 114?
So what I know is there's a couple of different groups out there that have filed lawsuits for different delays. There's one out of kind of the Portland area. There was one over in Harney County, which maybe more recently you saw, where a circuit court judge came in and kind of delayed everything about the ballot measure. And so one of the challenges we have is we've got all of these different special interest groups doing their own thing. We're expecting a whole lot more, because as of today, when this was supposed to be good to go, people will feel like they've received some level of harm, or they've been harmed by not, in their mind, having their constitutional rights to purchase a weapon. They feel like that's been infringed. So we may see some private lawsuits filed right now. There's two things we're waiting for, Dr. Booker, is we've got a bunch of questions to the Department of Justice to help us clarify some things, so we know the path forward. And then every day there seems to be a new piece of information from some court in the state that has an opinion about what we should or shouldn't do. And so every day is a different day for us trying to figure this out. And so I think it's going to, I'm hopeful that it gets a little clearer in the next coming weeks with some of the court decisions. But I also know and been around long enough to know that we may just have to kind of muddle our way through this and see if we can get to something that makes sense.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to highlight, I agree with everything you said for all the things that could go wrong with this implementation of Measure 114. So I'm totally in agreement with everything you brought up, especially from a diversity, equity, inclusion perspective.
Yeah, it's really important as a Chiefs Association. It's important that there is a high likelihood, if not promise, that whether you walked into Eugene PD or Springfield PD, Albany, Corvallis, up and down the I-5 corridor, or over to Pendleton PD, that you'd go through the same processes very consistently. And really the thing that I'm not worried about, but I'm mindful of, is there's some level of subjectivity when we either approve or deny. There are some things that are automatic disqualifiers, which are codified in statute. But for instance, the gray area around mental illness and whether or not you are under psychiatric care or a danger to yourself or others based on your history, I could see being really subjective, and it makes me nervous.
Commissioner Chavez?
Yeah, so I just wanted to also make a comment on the statewide consistency. sort of in support of not being a leader for once. And that is that without statewide consistency, we're just gonna see folks go to a more lenient county to implement this stuff. Which is gonna kind of defeat the purpose.
One of the things that's important is to make sure we don't do something. And then 2 weeks later, we have to change that something because we have a new piece of information. And then 2 weeks later, we're changing it again. And it's just not fair to people to use them as the guinea pigs. I'd rather take a pause, let us build a robust, consistent process that we know is ready to handle the volume and then launch. And that's what we're working towards.
Commissioner Lemon?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Chavez. I appreciate your point. So first of all, this is a quick question. I was just wondering if any of the lawsuits that have been filed so far have anything to do or are connected to the NRA. And then I would also like you to expand on the subjectivity of mental illness and how you're thinking you might approach that. Thank you.
The answer to your first question is I don't know. There's several different entities that I've seen on court documents that are firearms possession related, none of which say NRA, but they are a variety of like Oregon Shooters Incorporated and a different, I mean, so there's a bunch of different gun ownership consortiums that are a part of this lawsuit, but I don't know specifically if the NRA is involved in this or not. So that's the answer to that question. The second part of your question, like I said, in the law, we already have some things that are pretty clearly defined as disqualifiers for gun ownership. For instance, possession, certain felonies, for instance, you know, the law clearly articulates that a felon cannot possess a firearm. Another one is some language around domestic violence and convictions around domestic violence. The one that feels a little bit more squishy is the one around whether or not a person poses a threat to themselves or others or is under some level of psychiatric care. You know, the level of psychiatric care is not clearly defined. I mean, going to counseling because you're struggling with depression versus somebody that has a history of maybe violent tendencies that is under, you know, state mandated psychiatric care are two completely different things in my mind. And so we'll just have to be thoughtful about if we say yes and we send it to OSP and they say no and we disagree with them, how we're going to resolve those conflicts. Or if we say no and we don't even send it off, then it never goes to OSP, then there's that appeals process. So I do think that there's a little bit of opportunity specifically for people kind of in that realm of mental health that we're going to have to clean up what standard are we using by which we say yay or yes or no to firearms ownership. So, and we're going to work out those details and dig into the statute and be able to, I think, clearly define that. But that's just another layer of complexity that we're working on.
Thank you for putting that as a priority area. It concerns me that most people, or, you know, the statistics go that, you know, most people will kill themselves versus kill someone else. And when you bring that to mental health, that more than doubles. So I really appreciate that you're actually looking into that. And thank you. I look forward to updates.
Just as a side note, I'll end on this. Another side note, another interesting complexity to this is it does not exempt law enforcement professionals. So while we issue them a badge and a gun to do their work, they would not be able to go purchase a firearm without a background check and their fingerprints be enrolled, even though we've already done that and doing those things to include off-duty carry. So now we're thinking about our off-duty police officers and the fact that they are not allowed to carry a firearm off duty unless they have a permit to purchase. And then the whole other piece of this is the magazine ban, which is not, we're not in that space at all, because that is a completely different animal. But the magazine ban of the magazines that hold more than 10 rounds is a completely different nuance to this. So lots to think about on this one.
I just want to interrupt real quick. It looks like our owl camera, the one that's capturing us here in the room at EPD isn't working, but I'm hoping you guys can hear us still and we can move forward. It's frozen, so I'm not sure what's going on, but at least we'll be recording the conversation.
Yeah, we can still hear
We can
you.
hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Mogart?
Yeah, thank you. So from what I understand, there's already pieces in place for people to get registered or to get trained that would apply to 114.
There are the sheriff's office associations or the sheriff's offices who already have a system set up for your concealed handgun license do have an online training component for that educational proficiency piece that we might be able to leverage. So we're working on how we can use that as a opportunity to at least leverage the educational piece, because it's those requirements are the same. The complementary piece that we don't have solved is the practical piece, the demonstration piece. So we're looking at whether or not our sheriff's offices do have some infrastructure in place to handle that piece. Yes.
Okay, and how about the community colleges or the college courses that take place that would allow for people to get training that way? Would those also complement that?
Well, it could, but in the ballot measure, it says certified law enforcement certified firearms instructors. So I don't know what that means, Silver, because I don't know of any law enforcement certified firearms instructors except the ones we have in-house that train our own people. So that's where the challenge becomes with a third party is I have to be willing to say, I'm going to certify you as a third party or an outside party that you're doing what you need to do for the training portion of ballot measure 114. And I'm open to doing that, but you can imagine some of the liability that I absorb on behalf of the city of Eugene if I say I'm going to certify you as a law enforcement certified instructor.
Concerning the ban on the large capacity magazines, what specifically is the issue with the department? You keep speaking about it, but I don't think there's any mandate for anybody to be out searching for the large capacity magazines.
No, we're that largely is not going to be a thing for us. I mean, we'll, everybody that owns a larger capacity magazine now is grandfathered in. This is all for new purchases. Right. And I got to tell you, I've got a whole lot of other things that are important to safety in Eugene that are going to take a lot of our time. If we come across that, we'll deal with it, but we're not going to be proactive in that particular piece. The thing that concerns me more is the fact that it doesn't exempt my officers. So my officers are basically, if they carry a magazine that holds more than 10 rounds and they're not in uniform, they're in violation of this law, the way it's written right now.
Unless would they have grandfathered in magazines, right?
Well, yeah, but they don't own, that's the tough part. They don't own those things. That's department owned. And so we're trying to figure out how this works.
So the department currently has large capacity magazines.
Right. Most of our handguns and our rifles that we have in our system hold more than 10 rounds. Yes.
Okay. One of the things is that, I saw your pieces on the news a lot this past week, and I know we've been pushed back from the December 8th date, and I'm grateful for considerations around how this is going to be implemented, but I also feel that this is something that the people of the state wanted to happen, and I think we need to be true to what their wishes were as well.
Yeah, and that's going to be that, and we agree with you. Whether, like I said, whether it comes out of this as a Senate bill, a House bill, or a ballot measure from our voters, we took an oath to uphold those laws, and we want to do that. What's happened in this particular case, which is unusual, is that law enforcement wasn't brought into the conversation at all when this was written. And so there's a lot of unintended consequences with this ballot measure that we're trying to work through so that we can meet the intent of the ballot measure. So I couldn't there's no way there's no permit for me to issue today. Even unless it's a posted note with a note from Chief Skinner saying, hey, I give you permission to carry a weapon or to buy a weapon. That's the problem with this, is that we're wanting to do this work. And if it was just up to Eugene PD, it'd probably be easier, but it's not. It's up to OSP to do their part. the FBI to do their part, and then all of us as chiefs across the state to do our part together.
Right. It just, last comment, it feels like it was, hey, this is one last opportunity. Go out and get your handguns and anything you want before Christmas, because next year you're not going to be able to do so.
I will tell you, some gun shops have reported they've done 7 months of business in the last 2 weeks.
And this happens all the time. So
Yep, it does.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Commissioner Dominguez.
So just out of curiosity, you were saying that currently the weapons that you do have in your possession are grandfathered in. So like any magazines and stuff, like how are you going to replenish your supply? Let's say you like shoot up all the things that you need to shoot. Then can you buy more stuff?
We are exempted in the
Oh.
if we're buying it in our and we're using it in our official capacity. So we're fine, and we can use those or have those available in our official capacity. The piece that's a little bit strange is it does not, it defines an official capacity for us. And most of the time, our official capacity is on duty, in uniform, or in plain clothes, on the clock, on behalf of the city of Eugene. I know that off duty, we have had instances where officers have intervened in serious criminal conduct. And in some cases, we expect them to. And so that it has left them out. Like, what are they supposed to do? They're supposed to leave their department issued weapon at home, the department issued magazine at home, and not do this. Or if they don't do that, are they subject to, some kind of illegal possession and or carry? We're still trying to work out all those details.
Oh, so you can't like this thing can't be amended in any kind of way?
Ballot measures are hard. Once they're voted on by the people, the only way you do that is you refer them back to a vote of the public. Now, the legislature can step in and amend some things. And so we're not sure what they're going to want to do with this. I think everybody, quite honestly, is waiting to see what the court system is going to say about some of the challenges that have already been there. I think everybody's kind of in a little bit of a wait and see, because we could very well build something and have the court come right over the top of us and say it's unconstitutional, can't do it. And now we're, back to square one. So we're kind of waiting, hoping the courts kind of weigh in on this.
Okay, my final question is, can you confiscate things? So like if you were to come across like magazines but were grandfathered in, like you can confiscate those?
Well, if we can prove that they were purchased prior to this date, no, we would not confiscate them. If they were purchased after the date and they don't have the permit to purchase is only for firearms. The ban on the magazines doesn't have anything to do with the permit piece. So the magazines are either yes or no. We would confiscate those. Yeah.
Oh. Okay. And then that means, what would you do with them? Do you know? Is there even like a thing?
Well, the ballot measure doesn't clearly articulate what crime you commit if you're in possession of a high capacity magazine. And maybe it does in the details. I just haven't read all.
Okay. Okay, but they will be confiscated for anybody.
But they would be confiscated in the event that it was an unlawful possession of a high capacity magazine. Yes.
Even if they had a receipt.
Well, if the receipt was predated, then no, because they're grandfathered in. If they had a receipt that was after the implementation day, so we'll call it December 8th, and they clearly bought it after this law was in effect, then that's when we would take them.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Commissioner Hawkins.
Chief Skinner, it's a pleasure to meet you. One quick question. You mentioned the live scan technology not being usable for this scenario. Is that simply for this particular application, or is it a more systemic issue that could affect other processes?
We use live scan a ton, and it mostly is it's a high level of efficiency for us. The piece that I'm trying to better understand is for the FBI and OSP right now, their at least initial comments are that they want the fingerprint cards that we used to ink and roll. What's interesting is live scan. We can live scan fingers and print that out and send that to them. But right now, they're of the opinion that based on some level of analysis, they need to have hard copies of the fingerprints, of the old fingerprint cards. If you ever got fingerprinted way back in the day, you know, your hands ended up being all black when you're done, and it's just, you know, ink everywhere, and it's a mess. And you run the risk of a smudged print getting kicked back and not being able to be identified, and it just could start this process over and over and over again. But we're going to push really, really hard to see where we can figure a way for this to be as electronic as possible. You know, you'd think in this day and age, we could electronically fill out these applications. We could do a quick background check here, make sure there's not any immediate disqualifiers so we don't waste people's time. Live scan fingerprints, see their proficiency test to include education and demonstration, package that all up in an electronic document and send it to OSP, but we're not there apparently.
So it's a requirement of the other agencies, not a deficiency of the equipment that we have.
Correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lemon?
Thank you, Chair. One quick question for the chief. And so if arms with extended capacities are allowed on duty, but you would like your off-duty officers to be able to act in capacity when they're off duty, then why is it a problem for them to go through this background check? I would assume they already passed many background checks to become a police officer. So I don't quite understand why that's an issue.
Well, I think you outlined what I would say is that they've already been through. If the spirit of what we're trying to do is to make sure that you have a permit to purchase a firearm, is that you are a person that can purchase a firearm, that you don't have a disqualifier in your background. And we've already done that work with our police officers, and we know that there's no disqualifier. Then why would we have them pay $65, re-roll their fingerprints, have them fill out a new application, wait 4 to 6 months from OSP to tell us what we already know, come back and say, okay, now you're good to go to be able to have your firearm off duty. So, you know, there just wasn't a lot of thought put into some of our law enforcement professionals that already, quite frankly, more than meet this burden that Measure 114 has established as the minimum standard for firearm purchase and possession. So we're trying to get some clarity from DOJ if that was just an oversight, or if their assumption when they wrote that is that the words in the ballot measure that say in official capacity, that law enforcement professionals are acting in their official capacity, both on and off duty. We certainly hold them accountable for their off-duty behavior, as if they were, you know, an employee. So we're trying to get some clarity on that, and it's a little bit nebulous for us right now.
Okay, well, as someone who works in health and human services, I would really hope that you don't ask your officers to be cops 24/7, because I know how hard it can be to be on a job 24/7. But it does concern me a little bit that, because I've seen what's happened in other states. It has not happened here, but it does concern me a little bit that because I go through like 4 background checks a year, that they wouldn't be willing to just go through another one to keep everything kosher. So
yeah, no, I agree.
The laws and rules change.
Yeah, sure. And I think, you know, one of the things, right, wrong, or indifferent, one of the things that we're always mindful of is we have a labor management relationship and a strong union, and there's certain things that are definitely change in a working practice that would need to be bargained at that level if we were decided to do that.
Commissioner Wynn? V?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Chief, about 20 years ago, that was one of the things I did when I was working, you know, part-time for the campus police department, was to fingerprint for teachers who were trying to, you know, students who were trying to get their teaching credential application in. The state requires fingerprinting. And you were right, you hit the nail right on the head. One little wrong move, and some people resist, you know, they're supposed to let you guide their fingers, you know, and just pretty much let their hand guide in your hand. And one little wrong move and the print is ruined. But I'm just wondering, and I'm assuming that most people who wanted to get a gun have a driver's license. Don't they already have prints at the DMV No?
No requirement for Prince to have your driver's license. There's only, certain qualifying employments or employment statuses that require that. So no, not everybody has Prince on file.
Oh, okay. Okay, I was thinking that, maybe if they did, that would save you a little bit of time. That would be a dream come true, right? In this scenario. Yeah, but I think, back to somebody else who asked earlier, it might have been Dr. Booker, but I really do think that, if you could, with the other agencies, figure out a way to work with third parties. There are a lot of, gun ranges that provide lessons already. And if they could be, certified through, law enforcement to be, a vendor who can teach, and then, give certification to the individual, that would also alleviate some of the stress that you're experiencing. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Dr. Booker?
Oh, yes. I was going to follow up on something I think Commissioner Lemon said, or Mr. Lemon said. And when he asked about the police officers having to have a secondary check, background check. Being prior military, I know that we hid a lot of mental health things because we didn't want to be disqualified from service or from duty, because we knew our clearance could get stripped away. So we weren't quick to claim any kind of mental health disorders. The reason why I'm in favor for the secondary check, seeing that you have 350 employees, surely all of them aren't all mental health perfect. So I feel like this would help to kind of help identify police officers who are struggling with mental health illnesses, and getting them the help that they need, and also understanding how that relationship works off duty and on duty.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. And I think regardless of Measure 114, we need to have systems in place that are checking in on our police officers and getting them the help they need. The one thing that I would clarify is the background check we're talking about is just a simple criminal history check. Have you been arrested? Have you not? So it doesn't necessarily dive into that. And on that criminal history check, there may be some indicators of mental health status on there. And maybe more importantly, many of our records management systems will have entries of individuals that we've had to, that we've gone out. So you could be somebody that has not been arrested at all, but if we've gone on a call where you've been suicidal and we've had to take you into police officer custody because you're a danger to yourself or others, that would come up and be something that would be considered. So when we think about the quote unquote check, it is robust for our police officers on the front end to include the psychological evaluation. And so the check in this particular case that we would be redoing is just making sure that we don't have a police officer that unbeknownst to us somehow got arrested for a felony or arrested at all. And if that was the case, I'd have a whole lot of different other issues besides whether or not they wanted to buy a gun if they were working as police officers and they'd been arrested.
We have three more questions for the chief's report. First is Commissioner Winbrock.
Yeah, just a quick aside for Dr. Booker and Jensina. For both the chief and the department, officer wellness is a priority, and we see that translated in policy through our work. If y'all ever get a chance to read the Obama administration's task force on 21st century policing, there's a really big report, the 6 pillars on officer wellness and safety. And I just encourage y'all to check it out because you get to see both through policy and the department's actions why officer wellness is important and why it should be a priority, both in policy and in practice. So yeah, just a heads up. There's lots of programs in place, but also policy measures to make sure our officers are well taken care of.
Commissioner Shivers.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment on the idea of a secondary background check. I think it's a fairly minor waste of resources. I don't hate it. It's not a huge, it's not like a an unnecessary impediment in my mind. But the real issue, what it sounds like folks are concerned about, is that an officer might have a history of domestic violence, maybe given our robust background checking, that would be uncovered by this secondary background check, maybe in another county. But I think that the core issue with that sort of loophole is that that officer would never be arrested in the first place to have that show up on a background check. So your concerns are all very valid, of course, but it's a little bit more nuanced in where the problem lies than will show up on a background check.
Commissioner Wynn?
Yeah, thank you. So Chief, this is kind of just a curiosity. What if somebody showed up for fingerprinting and they have really poor, prints, or if they had burns on a finger, or somebody who works in some industry that might have, caused fingerprints to go bad? In that scenario, what do they, what do you do?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a great question because they'd get rejected. The system would reject it because they wouldn't be able to identify them. So I'm guessing that there would be some, because this isn't the first time that's happened in the history of taking fingerprints. I mean, we've had this happen, I'm sure, and there's probably been some alternative remedies to verify the fingerprints. All the fingerprints are doing is try to verify identity. There's different ways I think we can do that. Again, that's not called out in this ballot measure. Nobody has thought about that nuance, and undoubtedly this will come up and will be part of the appeals process. And yet again, we'll have to find another layer of process to accommodate those instances where we can't positively validate a fingerprint because of certain aspects. So I don't have an answer to your question, V. Maybe we can figure it out over our next meal.
Sure.
All right, we're gonna now get into our two policies that we're going to be reviewing. Hopefully everyone has read the two policies. If you have questions, there's all the information. I'm gonna do the issue statement. This agenda item, this is on 805. This agenda item is to conduct a review of the chemical incapacitance policy 805. This policy was formerly referred to as chemical agents, and now is referred to as chemical incapacitants to better align with verbiage from House Bill 4008. We have here today, Sergeant Soulsby and Sergeant Julie Smith will kind of go from there on the first policy 805.
And since I wasn't at last month's meeting, I just kind of wanted to re-summarize kind of what our intent and why we did this. So policy 808 used to contain a section of the new policy 805, and it was kind of a catch-all for many, like 3 or 4 different standalone items: handcuffing, control held, impact weapons. And on the last page of the policy was tear gas, what was titled. So there's been some legislative changes and accreditation requirements. And then there was also a recommendation from the Citizen Review Board or Civilian Review Board to make it less confusing, to separate out the policy that contained all of them into perhaps 3 separate components. And so that's why we separated out. The other thing is that we wanted to align the terminology that we were using into the 21st century and with the House Bill language so that it's not confusing. And so those were some of the aspects that were, when we took a look at this policy, that we tried to implement in the document. So I hope that kind of answered some questions that you guys had before of how we ended up here and why we were looking at separating out and looking at this as a standalone policy. So I wanted to give you guys lots of time. So that's why I went ahead and gave you a draft version for last month's And since that time, we've made some revisions and you received the revisions. Should have had it in your packet last week. So I'd like to
And so,
open it up.
yeah, we'll open up. Does anyone have any questions on this? Commissioner Nguyen, your hand is up.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sergeant Smith, I thought you weren't here last time when we looked at these policies, right? I, for some reason, recall us talking about not using the term tear gas anymore. So I'm kind of wondering why that is still in the definition category, 805.2.
Yeah, and I do want to introduce Sergeant Bill Soulsby, who's here tonight, that can help talk about some of these things with me. In the accreditation, Oregon Association of Accreditation, there is a requirement for us to have a definition of tear gas in our policy. And so to align with the requirement so that we pass our accreditation, that's why we kept the word tear gas in the policy, but that's why we also made a qualifier in the policy that it's only referenced for that purpose. And we'd like to really, from here forward, kind of reference it as chemical incapacitants or in line with what the House bill references it as. Does that answer your question?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Lemon? Your hand's up.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Nguyen actually asked pretty much most of my question, but the vernacular in this still does bother me a lot. All of this is still lethal, or what the news might call less than lethal. And saying irritant versus incapacitant, I think relays two very different things. And I would just encourage the police department to go with actually what this stuff does versus what the common saying might be. Thank you.
Commissioner Lyman?
Thank you, Chair. Sergeant, I had a question on 8055-4. That language, when it is safe and possible to do so, officers shall minimize the incidental impact. Is that language that shows up somewhere else? You know, I would kind of be looking for more of a statement of, you know, you should try to avoid hitting journalists and bystanders and medics. It seems, my comment on it is the language seems kind of soft and permissible. It almost seems permissible to have that incidental, you know, overspray as opposed to trying to prevent it. And then I'll just ask the second question and then be quiet. The number 6, last month when you were not here, the sergeant that was here or who was in your place, the electronically amplified noise producing equipment, we were told, is not to be used by EPD in the mode of offensive, you know, the sound or the, you know, that mode, only to broadcast announcements. So it would seem that in 6, it's being grouped as it's being used as that amplification would be being used as a weapon offensively. 80556 is what I'm talking about there. So thank you.
I have a question for you. What would you suggest it say?
Well, for the minimizing contact, I would just say officers should try to avoid spraying civilians, medics, bystanders, you know, as opposed to when safe and possible to do so, they shall minimize the contact. It's kind of saying we're making a tactical decision to deploy one of these things, and we'll do our best to, you know, but maybe the tactical decision should involve the decision about whether, you know, the fact that medics or civilians or, you know, bystanders are going to get hit, that it might not be the right, you know, call. That's all. So it just seems the policy seems written as permissible, you know, when, you know, try to be careful.
So that,
as
yeah,
opposed to a
yeah.
mandate.
Yeah, and I was that language is directly taken out of the House bill language.
Okay.
Was added in at request by our city attorney who was familiar with the House bill and asked me to incorporate it into the policy. We can certainly, I used it directly the way it was written in the House bill, but we could certainly change how it's written here to be more direct versus qualified.
Thank you.
So my question is that a motion that we would look at making the language or beefing it up?
I will forward that motion to make the language more specific.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it. Though as a friendly amendment, can we just say, just delete that part when it's safe and possible to do so, just delete that part and have it start with officers shall minimize the incidental impact.
Absolutely.
Because minimize is already sort of leaving it up to the dictates of reality, given the situation.
And go ahead, Commissioner Wimbrough.
Yeah,
I concur with Commissioner Lyman, and I apologize if I'm butchering the pronunciation of your last name. I'd also propose an amendment of us moving 805.5.2, use of electronically amplified noise producing equipment earlier, and perhaps exploring changing the title so that it nested and it followed subsequent to restrictions on the use of kinetic impact projectiles for crowd management, 805.4, because I feel that use of electronically amplified noise producing equipment is mostly talking about the restrictions for noise producing equipment, and also that point in 805.5 subsection 6 talking about amplified noise producing equipment. Now that I hear that from Commissioner Lyman, it does seem to be at cross purposes with when you're talking later in the policy of we're restricting the usage of the noise producing equipment, but earlier in it, it's almost talking about when you're using it in an offensive capacity. So by switching the use of electronically amplified noise producing equipment and its restriction to earlier in the document, and then I think striking out that portion of amplified noise producing equipment from 805.5 subsection 6, I think the document would flow much cleaner and also express more directly why amplified noise producing equipment is being restricted in the way that the policy is.
Point of order. I agree 100%. Can we deal with the motion on the floor?
Yes.
First, thank you. Sorry.
So
I
Judge,
accept both friendly amendments.
do we have a second?
Yeah,
Do we have a second?
Who's our?
yeah. Happy to second. Happy to.
Happy to
continue
second.
my
Who got that?
Yeah.
So if you have any questions, obviously, Commissioner Wimbrough knows what he's talking on the same level. Commissioner Booker?
I just have a question. In terms of the training aspect, one of the things, like, these are military grade weapons. One of the things I know that we were, I'm always centered around mental health. We will always make sure that we had the mental health capacity to operate the weapons in which we were authorized to use. Under training, I didn't see anything dealing with that. Is it anything to check in place to make sure the officers that are authorized and trained to use these particular weapons are fit for duty? That'll be my first question. And the second question is, we'll just answer that one and I'll come back to my second question. I don't want to overload.
I'm going to defer that question on training because Sergeant Soulsby is in charge of our training division. And so would you like to address that?
Sure, I can try to answer it. So the fit for duty portion and the chief can also chime in on this because it's kind of his arena, but the fit for duty piece of that is an ongoing evaluation at the police department. You know, there's supervisors watching these officers, there's training officers, there's training cadre, there's fellow officers, and they're all chiming in on whether or not a person is fit for not just this, but all their duties. So as far as that specifically, if I'm training somebody to use a chemical munition, am I checking their fit for duty? I'd say yes, because it's an ongoing, consistent check throughout the PD for sworn personnel.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, somewhat. And then I guess the second thing is are they qualified also in the countermeasures? Again, something else, we were also trained in countermeasures of the weapons we were used to, i.e. like when I had to go in a gas chamber to understand what that feels like in the military. Like, are there things in place towards like them being trained on countermeasures of the weapons that they're using on people so they know how to administer first aid or how to, if they misfire and hit somebody, they got asthma, or, you know, are these, I see no training. And what I'm asking is, where's the training included in the policy that kind of defines how these officers should be qualified to operate these particular military style graded weapons, rather than just any officer that we pick that's on duty that night?
Hold on. Yeah, Commissioner Shiver.
Yeah, so one place that it is 805.5C, where it says only officers properly trained in the use of chemical munitions will be authorized to deploy these chemical incapacitants. As to your question regarding standards and practices, one of the things that I've learned, which took me a while to learn, is that these sort of standards and training evolve more rapidly than our policy does. So by tying that to the Department of Standards instead of it to a policy, we actually keep the training more up to date and more responsive to the needs of the community.
I get what you're saying, but I just feel like that's kind of putting the cart before the horse, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like, why would you put somebody out there that's not trained properly?
Well, it's saying that we won't in 805.5.
Yeah, but what I'm asking is like, is there nothing with policy? It needs to be specific. You can leave no stone for personal judgment. So what I'm asking is that in terms of the training used, it's not kind of, I think that needs to be spelled out in terms of, because you say properly trained. What is the properly trained?
I guess what I'm saying is that I do not feel qualified to decide what's properly trained when we have an entire state department to do that. That's all.
We have training standards to start with.
Yeah, go ahead.
Answer
Yeah, go ahead and answer that question.
So, Doc, when officers are hired, we have a pre-academy, then we have the DPSSD Academy. And in our pre-academy, they're exposed to CS gas, just like what you were talking about, the military gas chamber.
Oh, yeah.
They're also sprayed with pepper spray. And in that process, they're demonstrated on themselves and in their teammates what are the care of that. It's water, but but what is the care for that? So they both know the effect of how people feel, and then they also know how to counter it and to render, I'm not gonna call it first aid, but render them water and air and all the things that go into that to make the agent reverse.
And that's ongoing training as well, just to kind of tie into that. There is ongoing training as you progress through your career. We have in-service trainings. We have trainings where, you know, we have been exposed to CS gas and what that looks like and what that feels like. So it's not just one time or two times. We've had a good grip of time.
Okay. And then, yeah, the reason why I brought it up is I just wanted to make sure that the officers that are selected to operate these particular weapons are these officers that you're referring to that are like trained, the properly trained to operate these things. And like I said, I tie that into the mental health aspect of it as well.
Yes, and we also have a training policy as well, making sure that we're kept up to date on our DPSSD, our state standards, and quite frankly, I feel like here at this department, we go above and beyond. So I'm proud to say that we go above and beyond with our training.
Okay. Commissioner Dominguez?
So I still need a clarification on the tear gas thing because I'm not fully following why I think the ORS uses the word tear gas, and yet for some reason we're like moving away from the word tear gas and not calling it tear gas. But then if you look at the definitions, like it's still the same chemicals, we're just not calling it tear gas, but the ORS calls it tear gas. I'm kind of confused as to like what we're doing and why we're doing that. Like I think it's just extra confusing. Does that make
So,
sense?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to kind of explain that, and I'm gonna have Sergeant Sophie explain the term tear gas and what is actual tear gas is a military term. And he'll explain that we don't use tear gas in this department.
Right, but
And
we still use the chemicals though. It says the impact, what is it? It's just replacing the word with something else, but we're still using the same chemicals.
that's what I was trying to explain is that we're not using the same chemicals that are in tear gas. We are using a different, we're using CS and so.
Oh,
Okay. Kind of explain it in basic terms so that it's helpful for everybody.
So tear gas, when like if we asked everybody on the commission, hey, what's your definition of tear gas? Everybody would have a very different definition of it, and maybe they'd name something, maybe they wouldn't, maybe they just give what they think tear gas does. It's not a very specific term, it's a very generic term, and it's been around a long time, and it's frankly associated with munitions that we don't use. It's what it originated from, and that's the CN. And the reason they have initials, there's probably people smarter than me on this commission that can actually say the words, but they are very complex. So that's why they say CN. We do not use CN. I've been associated with our chemical incapacitants. That's a very difficult word to say. You guys picked a very difficult word. But the agents, I'm gonna say agents just for clarity for me, it's easier for now. I've been involved in that since 96.
okay, I think I get it. I'm sorry. I think you explained this last time, but I didn't get it. And then when you said it, like it made it through my head. Is anybody still unclear on this? Was it just me? Totally fine.
No, he wasn't here last time. He wasn't here last time. No, you're fine. You asked the question, gave you the best answer, and that's great. Thank you. Thank you both. Commissioner Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, one of the things that is unsettling is that the effect of, of the chemical incapacitant is that it causes tearing. And the leaving strain away from the term tear gas is almost like we're pacifying. We're trying to, put sugar coating on something that, that doesn't really need it. That's why I've asked a question in the last meeting when we discussed this, and I'm asking this now. And I think, other people are also a little confused as far as, why are we not using the term tear gas? Because that's ultimately what these, chemical incapacitants do. When you deploy it, it causes people to tear, and it burns the eye. So that the effect of tearing is because of the burning of the eyes, and by changing it, it's almost as if we're trying to make it sound like, hey, it's okay to use this, as long as we don't call it tear gas. I don't know if I'm making any sense.
If I could clarify a little bit. The reason that we're at least, and I was part of this impetus, because it's not a very, like I said before, it's not a very descriptive word. It's not it's a generic thing. It's like calling our ass or our baton a billy club. Lots of people have different connotations with that. It's been around for a long time. It's a slang, and it's not something. The policy, at least as far as how we're concerned with the people that are using it, it should reflect accurately what we use. And that's why we're saying what we're saying with that, and giving a definition to the chemical incapacitants as it's CS, because people still associate tear gas with the military grade like the doc was talking about, of CN. And law enforcement has, at least as long as I've been involved in it, 32 years, I'm sure the chief can chime in, we've never nationwide used CN. It's never been acceptable. Now, prior to that, maybe in the 60s, I don't know historically, but modern law enforcement has never used CN, which CN tear gas originated out of that original term.
Thank you. I can see that. I guess it's almost the same as calling sugar sugar and not calling it sweet.
Or sweet.
You know, because yeah, ultimately when you eat the sugar, it's sweet, but you still call it sugar. Okay, thank you for that explanation. I really appreciate that.
Commissioner Winbrock?
Yeah, I wanted to make two motions. I talked about them earlier, but I wanted to formally make the motion, so I'll make them in sequence. The first is
So go ahead.
No, Sean, please.
So is it the two that we talked about at the beginning with the moving of language?
Indeed.
It sounded like that was universally accepted, including by our policy analysts. So to make this official according to Robert's rules, to ask if there's any objections would be the next thing on the.
Is there any objections?
And just as a refresher, I'm making the motion that we transition what is currently 805.5.2,
Mhm.
which is use of electronically amplified noise producing equipment, to immediately after 805.4, restriction on the use of kinetic impact projectile.
That was the first thing, right?
Correct,
Okay.
right. Yeah, and we might even explore, instead of having it entitled use of electronically amplified noise producing equipment, for consistency's sake, title it restriction on the use of electronically amplified noise producing equipment. And then the second motion is under 805.5, use of chemical munitions by EPD personnel, subsection A, number 6, striking out electronically amplified noise producing equipment, because it is not a chemical munition, and also what's currently later in the policy talks about the restrictions on the use of amplified noise producing equipment.
I'm fine with it.
I think those are both doable and reasonable, and I have.
There was one more thing.
was-
There was the taking out the when it is safe and possible to do so in subsection 4.
Yes, point number 5, yes, and I.
And you wanted to make a motion for this?
Yeah, so those motions were already made. They're currently on the table, but they're all one motion. So if anybody has any objections to any parts of those motions, they'd have to raise them now and we'd have to separate them out again. But when we talked about them before, it didn't seem like anybody did have a problem.
I don't.
So as chair, you would ask, are there any objections? And then say, hearing none, it sounds like it's universally accepted and it passes.
So are there any objections to that verbiage? I'm hearing none. So it sounds like that goes.
And that clears up all the motions that were on the table.
Thank you.
So that's what Robert's rules.
Commissioner?
I would like to ask about 8055 subsection A, number 5. Regarding when handheld chemical incapacitated munitions or kinetic impact projectiles are used in a crowd, officers shall make effort to notify emergency rooms. May I receive clarification on who is the definition of the officers? My expectation is that the officer in the heat of the moment who is discharging this is not simultaneously on the phone calling Sacred Heart. So who makes that call? And this may be entirely out of order, but for my clarification, because I am new to this body, I would like to know who accepts the responsibility for that phone call.
Great question.
I think in that situation, and I'm just gonna say it would be the incident commander on scene would probably be making those notifications through the use of our dispatch center. So again, the language was taken from the House bill to put into here. We can certainly be more specific in there if you guys feel that that's important.
There's usually a section, does this have a section for supervision, like supervisor's responsibility?
Yeah.
We can stick that in there.
I think it's in health control, isn't it?
It might be.
Yeah.
When we separated it. It might have-
So she can work on that.
I can certainly add a section in the policy that talks about supervisor responsibilities and then reiterate that in that section, if that would make it more.
Is there any more?
Can I just make a suggestion right there? Because I don't want to get this overly complicated. I mean, from my perspective, I could care less who makes the phone call as long as the phone call's made. That's not necessarily a supervisory responsibility solely. I think it's as long as the policy articulates that a phone call shall be made to your healthcare, the healthcare provider, and then whatever the language is, it does leave it open for that to be accomplished by a variety of people who have the capacity to do that. An incident commander could be up to his or her eyeballs in managing this thing, to include media and everything else, and may delegate that to an officer saying, hey, or a dispatcher saying, hey, can you call the hospital and let them know we're on our way? So just I don't want to get us into a situation where we more so clearly define who can do it, that then we're out of policy the minute we're trying to do this.
Can we then broaden the term so that it is more of the agency or the police department will
Right.
notify students? Because in my mind, as a layperson, officers are the ones that are actually the boots on the ground, the ones with the uniforms, the ones who are actively engaged.
Yeah, we could very well have a professional staff person there in support that we could say, can you give the hospital a call? And and quite honestly, we would probably have our dispatch center do that, and they're obviously technically not officers, but they'd be making that call on our behalf.
All right, thank you. And a lot of this stuff is also brought in the forefront. So even like prior to actual deployment, we're already getting things in place and making phone calls. I can't say all the time it's been the hospital, but for things of like emergency personnel services, like the fire department and medics, those are always on standby. So there's organized things that we can do on the forefront.
Thank you for the perspective.
Commissioner Booker?
Yes, I'm glad that Ms. Hawkins brought that up about having somebody on staff to call. I was just on section 805.5.1, the decontamination protocols on section H. Question, it says in situations where multiple persons are exposed, officers should ensure that reasonable steps are taken to contact those exposed. What are the reasonable steps?
So if I can kind of, and you guys have been talking about this for a while, but put this in a little bit of perspective. Some of this is new to us. We, like that last one you guys discussed, we didn't have that before. So I'm not even sure what I can kind of surmise what they want us to do when we talk to the emergency room, but that's never been our policy before. So this one here, it's been in our policy before, but it's not been that we sought them out. If they were in our custody, we were charged with that. We were responsible for their well-being. If it's people that are affected, they were in the riot or whatever, however they got exposed to gas, we in the past, we haven't sought those people out. If they seek us out and they're not in custody, we would provide care for them, but we don't seek them out. So we'll have to figure that out, how that looks in real time.
Yeah, we discussed this as a training component, and we took decontamination protocols out of our policy and mirrored it to our OC policy so that it was actually addressed in this policy, because prior to this, that wasn't addressed at all in regards to the use of chemical incapacitants. So we felt that it was important that there would be some decontamination protocols in the policy. And so that this language mirrors exact language from our OC policy. So I could certainly look at that paragraph, but I don't know if the explanation that has helped you at all understand what we're meaning by that.
Well, as I've navigate and learned, I know I'm coming in at the end of this, but that's why I'm just pointing out certain things that just kind of like leave me with questions. And then I don't know if this is a proper question or not, but it's just something that came to my mind. Do you have any data on when these particular chemical weapons were used and deemed warranted, and when they were used and deemed unwarranted?
Are you talking historically or?
Yeah, I'm just talking about like just you know, I know this policy is changing, but since the department took on using chemical weapons, do you have any data showing when these chemical weapons were used and it was warranted, and when it was used and it was unwarranted?
So CS has always been approved for civilian application for law enforcement as long as I've been a police officer. I don't know the historical way that came about. But that's the only, you keep saying chemical weapon or chemical weapons, that's the only munitions that we've ever used for crowd management is CS. As far as those munitions go.
So Dr. Booker, to maybe speak to your point, the use of chemical incapacitants, much like many of the other tools that we have, will get scrutinized heavily to determine whether it was justified or unjustified based on the totality of the circumstances. And in the event that it is justified, then we're able to articulate that. In the event that it's unjustified, then we equally articulate whether there was a policy violation or unjustified use of that particular level of force that we used against resistance that we're seeing. So we do keep track of our force applications. In all instances, our force applications we keep track, and we have statistics on instances of justified uses of force and unjustified, or what we believe to be unjustified uses of force. And all of this, at least in the contemporary times, all of this gets vetted both internally and then ultimately has a place through our auditor system for evaluation as well. So there is some checks and balances about whether we're using it appropriately or inappropriately.
I understand. And then just based off of that data, is that something, this is just me again, learning this, the way this commission works. Is that data that we would be privy to, just in terms of making policy and understanding how policy should be maybe written around the use of it, or what we actually use here in Eugene?
Much of
covering all of them.
Yeah, much of this is public record. Certainly there's aspects in the event that there was an unjustified use of force, and the outcomes of that with regards to personnel and discipline may not be made available. But as far as the applications, and really our system is set up, quite frankly, for us to learn what direction and training we should be going in as a result of what's working, what's not working, where are we making mistakes, where are we applying things we shouldn't apply. And so it's an iterative process. And so policy is constantly changing based on how we see the different uses of different tools that we have within our profession, for sure.
All right, thank you, Chief.
Yeah,
direct
Mr. Lemon?
comment on that as well is Alan Lyman is on the CRB. So there is that direct communication through that as well.
Yeah, it is. Commissioner Lemon?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Real quickly, I'm still concerned with the vernacular around this bill, or this whatever you want to call it, incompatible versus irritant versus tear gas. I think people understand what tear gas is. I don't know if you're trying to obscure what the other two words mean, or if that's just where we're moving to, but they do the same exact thing. And I still have this picture on my phone on my background of a can of CS gas right after the riots, but it was 2 blocks away. And you said that you always consider where you're at and who might be affected. Well, this was the summertime. I think it was June, I forget which year, 2020 probably. But there was an affordable housing complex that you all released what I would say is tear gas, because that's what I felt. But CS gas, I think, is what you would call it. And it came into every single person's windows that wasn't able to afford an air conditioner. And then I was able to take this beautiful picture of a CS GAN right on my street, right next to a little pothole with a marijuana planted in it, you know. But so it was a very ironic picture. But I don't understand why we are moving away from terms that people would understand to terms that might obfuscate exactly what you're doing.
So if I might, so in no disrespect intended, Scott, but CS gas and tear gas are not the same thing. I promise you, if you experienced both, you would understand that the military grade hot gas that they used and that were used in the 60s is a completely different reaction
It is.
that you would have. And so I would say using them in the same sentence is not the right thing to do. And I would also point out that one of the things that we've tried to do through training and some of the tools that we use is we're trying to demilitarize our police. Right. And to use military terms to suggest that we're using military grade tear gas, I think is not going in the direction this commission wants to go around the demilitarization of police. And so that's what concerns me about keeping tear gas in this, is that it continues to perpetuate this myth that we're using military grade chemical munitions that are not even close to the same chemical compound as the CS gas that we have. Now, I'm not taking anything away from the effects of CS and how that had affected those people during those days of riots, or even the individual we got to come out of his house after a felony domestic abuse with an assault rifle in hand. That CS gas was instrumental in us being able to successfully and safely solve that and have him surrender to us. So I'm not diminishing the effects of the CS gas, but I do have an issue with us still aligning ourselves with those military terms.
Actually, no, I appreciate that. I would just encourage EPD to put out an educational campaign saying what's the difference and why you're using such. Thank you.
Okay, we have Commissioner Shivers, and then Commissioner Dominguez, and Commissioner Winfrey.
I just have a quick follow-up to Commissioner Lemons. I think you should lead that educational campaign.
Correct.
I think that one of the best things about being on the police commission is if we have issues that are important to us, we can be the voice of that for the community. And it sounds like community members that you're connected to, that's something really important. And while, you know, I don't have a PhD in chemistry, I think a couple of hours at YouTube University, I feel like you could really cohesively talk about how both the chief and the department and our role to the policy commission is helping the demilitarization of the department by moving away from tear gas and talking about the differentiation between tear gas and CS gas.
No, thank you, Commissioner Winbrook. Would you be down to do that in January?
Let's do it.
There you go.
Awesome.
There you go. That's work. That's work. Love it. Commissioner Dominguez? Are your hands up or is it not?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, no, it is. Sorry. I just kind of wanted to, what is it called? Piggyback off of Dr. Silky Booker and Commissioner Lemons. Just to look at as able off. Oh, sorry. I'm not being specific. 805.5 section A letter G. Basically also just kind of look at that and how it is that you're hoping to enact that. I don't know if this is also one of the things that wasn't in the policy before, but how is this actually executed is another question. So G says, as able, officers should offer assistance to any individuals accidentally exposed and who feel the effects of the munitions. Also, such incidents must be reported to the officer and immediate supervisor as soon as possible and detailed in an incident report. So just kind of going off of that, like how would anybody in that building be helped or assisted in any kind of way? I don't know if anybody would have been alone, but if they would have had like an attack or something, or I don't know, like what the effects could be. But how do you check on those kinds of buildings when you accidentally hurt people inside of buildings that weren't the target and you don't really have immediate access to? Thank you. Just take a look at that. I don't know how that's going to be executed.
One of the things I think is important with regards to putting this in context is many of you that are thinking about this policy are thinking about a point in time where this was used during some of our toughest days around crowd control. in riots. Understand that the 90% of the time we use this gas, it's very intentional and methodical around resolving a very dangerous situation like the one we had last weekend with the domestic violence assault weapon standoff that we had that was successfully resolved after about 6 or 7 hours of negotiations and then gas. In that instance, we do have control over the building. We're able to go in, we're able to remove the, once we have the bad guy in custody, we're able to go in and render aid to anybody else that happens to be in there. Any other adjacent either apartments or buildings, we have the ability to reach out to them and do those kinds of things. And so, sometimes we get caught up in kind of some of the more public facing things that this chemical incapacient is used for, but it's used for a lot of things that are much more in our control. And we have the ability to kind of get our arms around the care and the harm reduction of the immediate area once we use these tools.
Oh, so are you saying that maybe that would be something that would be more addressed in a different policy, like a crowd control policy, like how it is that you would enact that kind of safety blanket for everybody else that has been affected by it? Like where, or does that just not need to be in policy, how it is that you go in and help people that are collateral?
I don't know if we need, community community caretaking of this, I'm not sure to what extent we need to codify that in policy. I think anytime that we're using these kind of chemical incapacitants in a situation where we can safely be able to render aid to people, we have a tendency to do that and offer that. We could make mention of that, something very generic that in all cases we're applicable, offering, immediate, care to those individuals affected by the incapacitant is advised or would be expected of us. By practice, I think we do that mostly anyway. So if we want to put it in, we can put it in, but
I guess I kind of see that where you're saying that basically like the police will eject these things and then they'll go up in the air and stuff. And so you can only really address the people that are immediately visible, and really rendering aid is more of a medical thing. But then I guess it's not really your responsibility to go into an apartment complex and be like, hey, is everybody okay? By the way, this is going to go away in 15 minutes or something.
Yeah, again, we're talking about something that we've done open air out on the street. Say we've got a riot that's been declared a riot, and by statute, we're able to use chemical incapacitants to disperse the riotous behavior. That, the collateral, the wafting in the windows of the collateral buildings is not generally speaking what this policy would be speaking to. This would speak to the individual that's held up in his apartment, and we have to take him into custody, and we use chemical incapacitants to take him into custody. And now that we have taken ownership of the building, we can go door to door and check on residents and make sure that they're doing okay and they didn't get exposed. So in my mind, those are two completely different applications. And quite honestly, we can probably count on one hand or a couple of fingers over the last of the 5 years that I've been here that we've actually used any kind of gas canisters in an open air environment, and that was all within a short time frame in 2020. So you guys' call. I just don't want to make it so difficult we can't figure out how to get to yes on some of these things.
Oh yeah, and I don't want to prevent that either. I guess I'm just wondering where it is that's addressed. If
I want to make sure if we can continue this, and I want to go to the next policy, but for the commissioners who are asking about the tear gas and the word of the tear gas and the CS and so forth, my question is this: are you basically saying that you would prefer that the police did not use either or at all? So so my question is, if there is a riot, there, and everyone, it's been defined as a riot, what should they do? Because the answer is not someone comes out and says, stop what you're doing, we don't want this. So what I'm saying is, what should they be using? We ask someone to take something out of a toolbox. My question is, what would you put in the toolbox? And the last of those things wouldn't be a gun. So if you're trying to stop a riot, what would you be using versus they're saying, we need this thing, and here's all the rules behind it. This is how we train on it. So what I want to make sure we're thinking is, if they stop if you're saying something's not right, is that because that's what I'm hearing, then what is the alternative? Are we looking at it in that perspective?
I think it's situational. More like we're talking about a riot versus a police officer making a decision to use these weapons when there's no need to use it. Like there's a judgment call there. Like, so riot situation, yeah, I can definitely agree that some sort of, and just by the way, I've had both forms of gas, so I know how both of them make you feel.
Right. So you know that both of those are not the same.
They're not the same, but they have a lot of the same effects. Like one lasts longer in your system than the other one does.
And I would believe that what they're wanting is to disperse.
Right, which I get if it's some, but what I'm hearing is like the tear gas argument versus use of these particular weapons in situations, riot versus like Chief was saying, they had a situation last week where they had to use it on an individual domestic violence situation. Like so it boils down to situations when we're using these particular weapons and should they be administered, and who's making that judgment call, along with people understanding what's in these particular chemicals that they are dispersing.
Commissioner, hold on one second. I have Councilor Ye.
It's not related to this, so I think you should.
Okay. It'll go, Commissioner Lemon, go back to you.
Thank you, Chair. Piggybacking off of Commissioner Booker's thing. So the language really does matter. It does. He served overseas. He felt tear gas. But I really think that people here understand tear gas as anything that is gonna incapacitate you. So whether or not they're different chemicals, and I know they are, I don't think that is really an issue. I think we need to be more transparent about that. And then basically, giving the commander systems being able to use tear gas versus not, it versus a riot. So on the George Floyd riots, the riots were not tear gassed, but the surrounding blocks were. They did not consider everyone who was around them, and they didn't tear gas anyone that was involved. So I get really a bit irritated knowing that I was one that was living downtown during that time, when I hear that things were being tactically done, because that riot kept going and the tear gas was going on the surrounding 4 blocks. So I'm sorry, I'm just a bit irritated at this one, and I hope I made a point.
Thank you for your comment. Commissioner Shivers.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's a bunch of things that we're sort of conflating, right? This policy, as the chief pointed out earlier, is specifically for use in small scale situations. The crowd control situation would address, the crowd control policy would address a lot of the concerns you're raising, Scott. And we separated this out specifically because we recognize that they have different needs, right? Our community needs different things, and our department needs 2 different guidelines depending on these things. I'll also say we've updated the policy a lot from what we've learned as a result of those riots. So your concerns, I don't need to feel like they're being dismissed. All of this is happening, all of this review is happening because we noticed some weaknesses in our policy as a result of those incidents. The second thing is that this policy does refer to tear gas in the colloquial sense and tear gas in the specific sense. In the specific military use sense, it's saying we don't do that. And in the colloquial sense, we're specifying one of the incapacitants that we do use, but the policy is covering both of them. So we're not trying to weasel out anything. We're with this policy trying to offer a complete picture of what's going on. What I did hear that I think you sounded, you picked out specifically that I think is a little bit more maybe nitpicky or maybe more concerning, is the idea of calling them irritants in one section and incapacitants in another one. So I think that's might be where, please correct me if I'm wrong, but where you're feeling like your concerns are being dismissed is that in some sections they're called irritants and in some sections they're called incapacitants. So I think that's the some language calling them incapacitants universally, if that's possible, or adding irritants / incapacitants might shore up some of those.
That definitely, yeah, definitely incapacitants.
Judge Lehman.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we're writing a policy and I don't want to take a lot of time on this, but like tear gas, the police have explained to us repeatedly tonight, tear gas is a term that does not apply to agents that we use currently. So I think to use an imprecise term, each agent, whether it's an irritant or whatever it is, should be described as the chemical as what it is. And it certainly, it would be wrong to put forth a policy talking about generic tear gas that simply doesn't refer to anything specific. And we're writing a policy about the use of these agents. And so they should reflect what each agent is. I just think it's fairly simple. And it's certainly, there's no effort. It's an effort to be transparent. It's not an effort to obfuscate. I really don't think that that's fair. So respectfully.
Definitions listed in the policy are not sufficient.
I feel like it's super strict.
5.2.
I feel like it's really cool.
Yeah, I'll read it that way. Commissioner Mogart.
Really quick, I would like to address Bonnie's concerns with G and H, and I wanted to let her know that I will take those two and really look at it, making them actual practical. The language was taken out of the House bill, but I can see that perhaps we need to word it to where it's practical what we could do at the time, and not just have it so broad that it makes it confusing. So
does that help?
Okay.
Yeah. Commissioner Mogart.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So one thing I really like about democracy is that you can have winning side with 50+1. And I'm going to be voting no against this policy. It's going to pass, but it seems to me like there's a lot of concern from some of the commissioners. And I think it's really important that we as commissioners on this body make sure that we don't silence anybody's voice or opinion or questions or concerns. It's a really important issue for us to be able to have these conversations and not make other people feel like their voice doesn't matter or that their concerns don't matter. I think the chief spoke well. The chief spoke for himself, and he should be able to speak to this issue. And I think it's just time for us to call the vote.
Commissioner Lemon.
Thank you, Chair. I agree that it is time to call the vote, but I really still want to stick to that vernacular. Optics versus reality are two very different things, and this commission's the entire point of this commission is to create more trust between the public and the police. And I would hope that we could be forthright around that. And if using tear gas or not, I could care less as long as we explain what the difference is. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Dominguez.
Just real quickly, also, I was talking about G and then H, and then just above that there's F. It says assurance should be provided to persons that the effects are temporary. I was thinking that I don't really know how, I don't even know if it's appropriate for it to be in this policy specifically, but I think that that assurance should be provided to people. So in the like if another riot were to happen or protest or whatever, but the thing is that like some kind of chemical is deployed, I think it'd be really great if we could actually assure people that the effects will go away in 15 minutes. And also in this policy, it's also mentioned that unless a medical provider specifies that you should apply Vaseline or some kind of oil to the irritation, you shouldn't. So I think that we should be telling people. So it's kind of providing the aftercare for people. Maybe that would kind of help. So maybe you don't have to go door to door, although maybe some people should check their neighbors, but that's something that the police department itself could send out in social media. It's just like, this riot happened. We deployed these things. These are the effects. They last this long. Don't apply this thing. And also check on your neighbors just in case. And then that would make it so that maybe we don't have to include that kind of stuff in policy or something, or some of that. Like, did that kind of make sense? Like, it could be just more of a social media thing. The portion, what doesn't make sense, Scott? I don't understand.
You're referring to subsection D of that right above there, and I hear your points, and I'll look at maybe making that clearer, and perhaps we could look at tactically how we could get that information versus putting it in the policy.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Zelenka.
Thank you, Chair. Words do matter, and what we're talking about here is a policy where words matter. And one of the principles that the commission works under is that we should be in analyzing these policies is that we should be as specific as possible and be as accurate as possible. And so when and in previous policies, we have changed words that we thought were too generic to be more specific and be very accurate in terms of what we were talking about. The fact that a word like tear gas is commonly used without people knowing what the heck it means doesn't make it appropriate for our policy, which is supposed to be as specific and as accurate as possible. And so I think I like Scott's idea. Let's explain it somewhere. Maybe it's in parents somewhere, but let's just make sure that people understand that tear gas is this broadly used term, as the chief said, that a whole bunch of people, you'd probably get 50 different answers if you asked 50 different people. And so that's why we try to be as specific and as accurate as possible in these policies. And while the policies are for the public, they're also guiding the police officers, and they need to know exactly what we're talking about in it. And that's why that specific and accurate part of policy modifications is really important.
And sir, maybe you can help me better understand this. So we do have the definitions in the policy. What am I missing here? I feel like I'm missing something at the table as far as being specific and wanting to break down our definitions, because our definitions explain CN gas, it explains CS, it explains tear gas weapon, toxic chemical, precursors. What furthermore are we looking for? Because I think I'm missing the mark.
Councilor Zelenka.
I don't have a specific suggestion, but maybe Scott, you do, since you brought it up.
Yeah, I mean, what?
I'll give it a shot. Exactly what is being used under what?
Commissioner Lemon, the only thing I'm asking is, what would you suggest that we write? What should a policy say? Because maybe what you're saying, maybe we all can agree upon it. But I just want to hear it. Not that that's wrong. What would suffice?
I mean, I wish I had more time to think of this, but something. So I would say put in the policies that we need to be in place, but then do an educational campaign that look, tear gas is something that was used in World War II. CS gas is something that these are the differences between them. These are why we will use them. I just don't think the public has a real understanding of the difference between any of these irritants, let alone poisons, which they ultimately are. But I'm sorry, I can't solve the police department's problem for them.
No, I
I
understand.
I can just give my advice.
From what I just want to make sure I have a clear picture of this as well. You're just wanting more communication with the public and community and constituents of what the differences are versus this specific policy. Like, is there something specifically in this policy that we need to put furthermore to expand on the definitions? Or are you talking about the community outreach portion and the education, actually doing a good job at communicating those things to the public?
No, thank you. I'm talking more about community outreach.
Okay.
I might not personally agree with chemical irritants, but I'm talking about letting the public know if they show up to a protest or if they show up to something, what to expect and how to go about it, you know?
Thank you for explaining that.
And I agree. I agree with you. Commissioner Dr. Booker.
Yes. The only suggestion I would have in terms of the language is that we be consistent with the word incapacitant versus irritant. Because you're talking about, like I said, and they're talking about more of minutes rather than radius. When you're dispersing these chemicals, you are incapacitated depending on the radius in which you are located and when it was fired. The further you get out from the radius of its initial impact, then it becomes an irritant. So we need to be very specific about what it's used for, and they don't use it to irritate a suspect. They use it to incapacitate a suspect. So we need to be consistent with that language throughout the policy, that it is an incapacitant, and specific with its uses and scenario in which it would be used.
Councilor Ye.
Yeah, so it kind of came up again, so I thought I'd comment. I agree that communicating with the community is extremely important. I am not convinced that that is our job to do, and it seems like we very quickly agreed that in January we were creating an education program for the community, and maybe I misunderstood that, but it gave me pause that whose job is that really, and that probably needs to be coordinated through our EPD's very good PR folks, and just to kind of decide on our own that we're going to do this big thing that could be very tricky and needs to be done very well. It made me have some concerns, my concern that, spidey sense or whatever. So I just want to put that out there that I want us to give that some real intentional thought and conversation. We're going to take something like that on.
Commissioner Finbrough.
Yeah, just because I suggested to Scott, I suggested it not as something the police commission is doing, but as police commissioners. So thank you so much for that really clear distinction. Just in the same way that we're using very prescriptive language, I think we should have very prescriptive actions behind that. Because as an individual police commissioner, I encourage folks to show up to the meetings. I encourage people to read the policy. And I wish that I had a chance to grab coffee with you, Scott, a few weeks back, because we've gone with this policy loads of times. And of course, the state is going to come up with their own legislation that we have to then update the policy too. But I think if we as individual police commissioners had been proactive in the way that we just engage with people as an individual commissioner, not as representative of the police commissioner, and not as representative of the department, we could have talk through the definitions with people who may have not understood the definition between CM and CS. So I was merely suggesting to Scott, hey, I have your back. If you want to talk about how we engage as police commissioners individually with the communities that we're representing, I am totally game to explore that.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
And just real quickly, because I was addressed, Ian, please reach out to me anytime. I would absolutely love to do that.
Thank you.
Really, I would appreciate your time. So.
Jeff Shivers?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask if we were ready to move on to the next segment of the agenda, or if we want to.
Not yet. We have one more. Councilor Zelenka?
There's a motion on the table too.
Yeah, having a little bit of time to think about your question about what specifically we would do. I think there's it does say what tear gas is, and it's the very technical definition of tear gas. But what I think's missing here is this narrative part that we've been all talking about. Maybe that gets put in parens at the beginning of the definition or at the end of the definition that says tear gas is a commonly used term that has X, Y, and Z history, and and for purposes of this policy, this is what it means. That kind of narrative, as opposed to the technical definition, I think would help with going a little bit towards that education campaign if someone were to read the policy and understand it.
Is there any more questions?
No, it sounds like we have a different motion on the floor. Did we? No, then I move to approve the policy as written. Or
Do we have a?
The only thing that I had suggested was that we use the consistent word of incapacitant.
Well, she has a lot of changes.
So, yeah, you've got a bunch of changes. So
Oh, okay.
withdrawing my motion.
Yeah, we're trying to, I say that she has an opportunity to put some of the changes in the policy that we've been talking about tonight. And then at a future meeting, after we've heard the revised version, we go from there. And then we'll have some to vote for. With what I've been hearing, is almost half the things, almost all the things that we've said can be changed. So I recommend that we pause and let her incorporate some of the things that she heard tonight.
I agree. And bring it back.
And bring it back. So
then it's tabled.
So do I need to get a motion to get that table?
No, you just move on.
No.
No.
We're going to go ahead and table it. Thank you very much. And we're going to move to the second part of this. Yeah, we might. Well, so what we're going to do is, in lieu of time, and I believe, in my opinion, this was a very healthy, strong, engaging meeting. This is like the first time that all commissioners were present, and I mean present in thoughts and concerns. And at the end of the day, we, as Commissioner Mogart said, we'll be voting on something. And where we vote, where it goes, it goes. Now we're going to begin with our closing comments.
I had a point that I needed to get clarified. Did we have any time for opening comments from the public?
Yes, we did. And we had a participant, Tom Peck.
Okay. I'm sorry I was late.
No problem.
And
Okay.
he talked about 114. So
Yeah, he talked about 114. We'll begin with you, Commissioner Mogart.
Yeah, thank you. Again, it's not lost on me that I'm often the person that people are shaking their head. Why are you asking these questions? But at the end of the day, the chief knows I respect him, and I believe he has respect for me. And some of the questions that I ask are to draw out some of the reasons, some of the different points that I have concerns on. And so this was a good discussion tonight. It was lively, and I for one think that we don't always have to be 100%, in consensus agreement on policy issues, that we can disagree and we can vote against something that we don't feel represents our constituencies. So great conversation, and looking forward to when we do finally take a vote on this. And we'll see who gets to yes with that, as the chief likes to say. Thanks, guys.
Commissioner Lemon.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say this was one of the best meetings I've attended. Thank you, Chief Skinner, for being so transparent and explaining so many of my questions. I really appreciate that. I very much looking forward to seeing you all in the next year, and I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Zelenka.
I don't have any further comment. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Ye.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm glad we have a full commission again. So.
Yes. Commissioner Lyman.
Thank you, Chair. I think the only thing I want, other than thank you to everyone, there was an omission at the beginning of the meeting. I believe the chair got away without giving his, where he was from and something about himself, so that I would move that at the next meeting, we begin and put him on the spot for that. But
Okay.
that's what I have.
Okay. Vice Chair Dominguez.
We could invite his mom and have him do that.
Yeah.
Thank you to the new commissioners. This was really great and very enlightening. And thank you everybody else to all your patience and with all our questions and just clarifying points. So thanks. Oh, and see you next year.
Great. Commissioner Booker.
I just want to say thank you for everyone welcoming me to the commission as the new person. I hope to add value to this commission. One of the biggest things I like to focus on is mental health, and I know what it's like to serve and be on duty and have to keep your mental health a secret in order to protect your job and protect your status and your rank and all of that. So hopefully we can work with officers and getting them the support that they need so they can still protect their rank, their paycheck, their clearances, and still be transparent with their mental health and stressing when they need help, because that's a big aspect and part of what we are going to be charged with in terms of the relationship with the community. So we got to take care of both sides, and I'm looking forward to hearing everybody's opinion. I never have anything personal. I never hold anything personal, because at the end of the day, we're not titles and we're not our position. So we are here trying to experience this human experience and navigate it as best we can with the cards and the history that was dealt to us. So as we try to make Eugene a place that's welcoming to everybody and all different graphics and people, just let us continue to support each other, be respectful of each other, and know it's okay to disagree. And I still love you no matter what the outcome is. And I look forward to being here. So thank you for welcoming me and having me here.
Great.
That was awesome.
That was awesome. Wasn't that refreshing? Commissioner Nguyen.
Somebody write that down.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank everyone for their participation in tonight's discussion. It's very robust. I've been on this commission for almost 4 years now, and I've not seen this level of conversation and engagement. And again, welcome to this body, Mrs. Jensina and Jensina Hawken, and Dr. Booker. Have a happy holiday season to you all, and be safe.
Thank you. Commissioner Shivers.
Yeah, it's super exciting to see you all, some of you in person, and I hope we get more of it next year.
Commissioner Winbrock.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo the welcome to our newest commissioners, Booker and Hawkins. Really appreciate the tenor and tone of today. Even when we disagreeing respectfully. Can't promise everyone that they'll be as exciting of meetings as this one, but that doesn't make it any less important. I just wanted to thank our officers and the chief for coming tonight and always showing up completely, even when we have to miss our family members' sports games. We're all making a lot of sacrifices to be here. So just respecting the sacrifices that we're all making individually and collectively is really important to me, and I know it's important to us. So happy holidays, everyone, and I'll see you next year.
Commissioner Hawkins.
I appreciate this opportunity for service, and I welcome interaction and engagement with all of you, particularly Chief Skinner.
And last but not least, one of the things that I'm working with, and we will go into further detail in our work session, but I kind of have Commissioner Nguyen and I have been kind of peeking at the mission statement, because that mission statement definitely needs to be worked on. So we need to, as a group, look at this mission statement. So when you ever get an opportunity, look at that mission statement. That can be better. That can be something that reflects more of us, is more current. Also, we have a whistle. We have a light. This is a part of the swag that we're trying to work on so far. When we have different police commission events, Commissioner Dominguez and we were out in the hot sun it was one of the festivals. It might have been the Chinese festival or something, we were looking at all the other tables. They had lots of different things that talked about their organization and so forth, and they were handed out. And we also have we're working on brochures, making them very diverse, as we are a very diverse body. We want to work on those diverse brochures and different things. I'll just give you an example of the type of stuff that we're working on right now. Next month, we have Sponsors Inc. We'll be doing a presentation as far as what they do here in the community. They have a new executive director. Her name is Morgan. I don't know her last name, but Morgan is she's the new executive director. Paul Solomon and her are working as co-executives, but they will both be here doing a PowerPoint presentation. So I suggest taking a peek at, if you haven't done so, Google up Sponsors Inc. Look at all the great work they've done here in the community, making our place safer, helping with the reentry and so forth of people. So that, and then our speaker that would have been today, and don't get me wrong, we needed a whole bunch of time on the policy that we were on, but the speaker that we have, just to give you an example of where we're going, was the senior athletic director in charge of diversity, equity, inclusion for the University of Oregon. You can't get to no more top shelf than some of these folk that we're having. So the only reason why he couldn't make it is because there was a death in the family from on his wife's side. So he still wants to speak. So we have to fit him in. We have sponsors. We have a lot of other things. So yes, go ahead.
Are we allowed to make suggestions?
Yeah, that's nothing but an email to me. So all you do is send me an email and we'll look. But I'm just saying that I try to make sure that we try to have the things that are discussed, things that I'm deeming as important, as good. And I think the people enjoy coming here to speak. We had a great time with Dr. Lake. We've had a great time. I had a sister come in speaking about sexual violence and domestic violence. So good luck. The type of things I love is what I saw between Commissioner Lemon and Commissioner Winbrock, because you're thinking outside the box. So what I'm saying is this, and think this way on this commission. It's easy to say something that's not right. It's easy to say, yeah, but I need to hear what do we want to do in place? That's where the hard work comes in. And often your suggestion, it might be what we needed to hear. That's it. And also, I want to thank especially the former chairs and former vice chairs, whatever. And I do not know everything. I'll tell you that right now. So anytime that you can share with me anything about Robert's rules or where we need to go, that does not come with anger. That comes with appreciation. So thank you very much. And we're done with our meeting.
Can we add little tear gas canisters to our swag?
Yeah,